My passage is from the short story Royal Beatings, which was written by Alice Munro, a Canadian short story writer who's been writing since the 1960s. It follows the main character Rose, who, through a third-person narrative describing her life as a child following the Second World War. It depicts her relationship as a family, between the dynamics of her and her father and her stepmother, Flo. It divulges on the time period itself, as well as the climax being a royal beating from her father due to her misbehaving. It is set at the beginning of the short story, after the introduction of the royal beating and after the introduction of her family and setting, so it's quite early in the short story itself. It is a significant passage as it introduces and develops the theme of varying personas within society, by which was ignited by the setting, and Munro continuously characterizes the father-daughter dynamic through the passage, which sets a tone for the rest of the story and foreshadows the royal beating. Now, this can be seen as a base for many of the future developments of the themes and the climax itself. It begins with line 1 saying, "Covered with cans of paint and varnish." Now, this can be seen as a symbol alluding to the facades presented within the family, as many of these cans of paint and varnish reside in the father's work shed, where his true self comes out as he gets rid of his facade. As many of these objects can be seen as a cover-up for furniture. It then continues on line 4, "Not the first, but the last war." This introduces a clear setting fueling the idea of self-entertainment. This self-entertainment can cause people to gossip and cause people to talk about others, which may influence the idea of having different personas or facades based on the situation at hand, so that you do not become a topic of discussion, which is later discussed in the story, where with Betty tied and the rumors against her father beating her, causing his death. And then this idea of personas is continued in lines 4 to 5, where it says, "Why should a man who coughed constantly, whose lungs took in a whiff of gas in the war, spend all his days breathing fumes of paint and turpentine?" This reinforces the idea that her father has many personas, and that within the workshed his true facade or his true personality comes out, as this is where he works. Yeah. In lines 10 and 11, this idea of self-entertainment is continued with the description of old men, what they do at the end of their day, drifting into aimless obscenity on the subject of women walking by or any young girl on a bicycle. This makes it clear the idea of self-entertainment and what was done during that time to keep yourself active, as it personifies the idea of boredom and develops the idea of gossip, as the old men are continuously commenting on young girls or their appearance. Then in lines 16 to 17, it says, "When he realized they were out, there would be a quick bit of cover-up coughing." This reinforces the idea of him releasing his true self, as when he's released too much or said it too loudly, he conceals it with coughing to try and cover up his true thoughts, reinforcing the idea of multiple personas based on situation. Then if we look at 19, "What could that mean? Rose used to repeat such things to herself, shows her curiosity, but also shows us a longing for almost a connection to her father, as she repeats those things, trying to understand them, trying to understand him almost, as she does not see his true self that often." And then this is reinforced by the immediate next sentence saying, "She could never ask him," showing a further disconnect with her father and describing the family dynamic and dysfunction that they have. In the immediate lines 19 to 21, it says, "The person who spoke those words and the person who spoke to her as her father were not the same, though they seemed to occupy the same space." This further develops the idea of varying personas based on situation and gives the readers a perception of how these personas interact, as they may occupy the same space, but they are not the same person due to the concealment they go through or acting they go through. It's a direct conversation regarding the theme of varying facades within the family, which reinforces the idea of a disconnect within the family, and this kind of foreshadows to the viewers a revealment of true selves, as they usually never occupy the same space, but in the future it is revealed that they can occupy the same space due to the changing personalities. And then in lines 27 to 28 it continues, "She knew that was enough to hear, and besides, what if he caught her? It would be terrible." This introduces the stern side and almost dominant side of her father, as there is an established sense of fear. This further foreshadows the future royal beating, as it gives readers an idea of her father's almost violent and aggressive side, as she has a preconceived fear of her father, which causes readers to almost empathize with her due to this limited narrative, which tends to skew the characters on the main character's favor, as many descriptions of Flo lead to her as a very stern woman, making her seem like the antagonistic character when she's actually just trying to take care of her, while her father actually seems more like the antagonistic character due to this preconceived fear that the readers are exposed to. This is then continued in the final lines 35 to 36, where it says, "The person creating the noise in the bathroom was not connected to the person who walked out." This summarizes the idea of changing personas based on situation, which is further built by future events, as even the simplest situation of a bathroom could change a person's persona, and it's almost as if the characters ignore the fact that there are these personas. They kind of just accept that the facades are a way of life within the family, building on the idea of situational facades, which develops the future theme of varying personas within the society, as due to a result of their self-entertainment, they have to conceal themselves almost to not repeat the events of Becky Tide. Becky Tide avoiding any outside attention almost. It signifies a base for the rest of the story, as it introduces these personas, as I've said, but it gives readers a connection to the main character Rose, as she describes her family and describes her fear for her father, as well as her confusion around him, showing her curiosity, characterizing her as a curious but also mischievous girl, as she continues to disobey her father or even listen into his private conversations with himself. Even though she is curious, she knows she's not supposed to be doing it, or she knows that she would get in trouble for it, characterizing her curiosity and her mischievousness, which again foreshadows to the future events of the royal beating. This is amplified by the foreshadowing of her father's stern behavior, which is more associated to his true identity, giving viewers and readers an idea of his changing personality, which almost amplifies her fear.